Murray's case, the defendant is present with his counsel as before. The people by their counsel as before. The witness, Dr. Waldman, is on the witness stand. All the jurors and the alternates are present as before as well. To everybody, good morning again. To the jurors, good morning. Dr. Waldman, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Do you
again.
acknowledge, sir, you're still under oath and still sworn to tell the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. This would be a resumption of cross-examination. Mr. Waldman.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Doctor, you said on questioning by Mr. Chernoff that even when patients come to you voluntarily, that they frequently embellish and or minimize their drug usage, correct?
Yes.
And again, that's a reason why you need to do your own independent, in-depth physical examination and review of the materials so you can make your own determination as to the proper treatment plan, correct?
That's too broad for me to answer. I don't know what material is.
I'm sorry?
What do you mean by material?
What do I mean by
You
material?
said material. It's your word.
Do you know what material means?
I do.
Okay.
I'm wearing material. But you need to give me a better idea. That was too broad for me to give you a specific answer.
Okay, how do you want me to narrow the question? So,
It's your question, sir.
okay. I'll start over.
Thank you.
Okay. People often embellish or minimize their drug usage, even when they come to you voluntarily, correct?
Correct.
Those were your words.
Correct.
Okay.
What
So there's no question pending, okay? And so you want to explain that?
I want to extrapolate on that for you, if I may.
Now it's real clear to you and you want to extrapolate?
No, I stopped you in the middle because I liked what you said and I want to extrapolate on those exact words. Embellish, undervalue, misrepresent. They tell me what they're using, always, but they don't tell me the precise amounts. That's what I meant by my statement to Mr. Chernoff.
How long have you been doing this?
23 years.
And in every single one, your word is always, they tell you exactly what drug they're using.
That's your word, not my word.
No, your word was always.
They tell me the drugs that they used.
Always.
Most of the time, because what you have to understand, sir, is care is voluntary. In addition, when a doctor and a patient meet, they develop, through the interview, through the conversation, a therapeutic relationship.
And I'll talk about doctor-patient relationship, but is it always or most of the time now?
Most of the time, almost always, pretty much every time, if you're a good interviewer and ask the right questions and know the names of all the drugs, you get all the information.
Always, most of the time, some of the time. Is that your answer?
Those are your words.
No, I'm asking you.
What would the objection if you had the last answer?
I'm asking you.
Ask a specific question and I'll give you a specific answer.
Is it always, most of the time, and some of the time? Is that your answer?
In my extensive experience, in my interviewing, I get the answers almost all of the time.
Okay, so almost all of the time.
Correct.
Not always.
Almost all of the time.
Now, where do you work as an addiction specialist?
I work at I work in my office, first and foremost, and I've worked at hospital-based facilities. I was co-director of a hospital-based facility for a period of time.
Where do you currently work as an addiction specialist?
Keeps interrupting my answers. My answer again is, in the past, I've worked at hospital-based facilities. I'm giving you the broad spectrum.
Sir, Mr. Chernoff can ask you questions as well. I'm asking you, where do you currently work as an addiction specialist?
My office and a number of primary treatment facilities that are confidential.
That are confidential?
Correct.
Did you tell Mr. Chernoff these confidential locations?
I did not.
Why are they confidential?
The clients there are confidential. The facilities would like to remain confidential, and so I'm respecting that.
Well, I'm not asking about any patients or client names or anything of that nature. I'm trying to flesh out your experience, and I'd like to know where you currently work as an addiction specialist other than your own office?
Okay. Is it okay to answer?
Absolutely.
Okay. I work at Visions Adolescent Treatment Facility. I work at Clearview Treatment Facility. I work at Authentic Recovery Center. I work at Canyons at Peace Park. I work at Cliffside Malibu. And I work in my office.
And where do you spend most of your time as an addiction specialist?
All of the above.
And you're a consultant, or are you actually giving person-to-person care, or how do you work at all those various locations?
Both. I consult and I see patients there.
At all the places you see patients?
That's correct.
And you also do the dialysis work?
I do.
Is that full-time?
What do you mean by full-time?
Well, it typically means 40 hours a week, something like that.
I wish I worked 40 hours a week. And so does my family.
So the question's still out there. Do you work?
I work a great deal of hours every week.
Okay. How many hours do you work in dialysis?
You know, I'm not being glib, but the real answer is I see every patient every week, and I work as long as I need to. It's variable. Sometimes it's many, many hours. Sometimes it's less hours.
Approximately how many hours a week do you work in dialysis?
I don't know. I couldn't quantify that, sir. I don't keep track of that.
You can't give me a range?
I really can't. I honestly, I don't count them. I don't track them.
Is there a reason why it's so difficult for you to answer my questions and it was so easy for you to answer Mr. Chernoff's?
Objection argumentative.
Sustained. You need not respond. Your next question, Mr. Wall?
You can't answer how many hours you work in dialysis. Is that correct?
What you're asking me is extremely nonspecific, and I'm telling you honestly, I don't measure.
How many hours did you work in dialysis last week?
I don't know.
I was specific.
I was at the dialysis unit Monday morning and afternoon, Tuesday for a few hours, Friday for a few hours. That's my typical week. Sometimes I go on Thursdays, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I go on Tuesdays, sometimes I don't.
Would you agree that in the field of addiction medicine, that it needs to be confronted as a real clinical disease with very real clinical roots?
It's absolutely a brain disease, and it needs to be treated as such.
And that's one of the reasons why, to competently handle it, you should have experience to handle it, correct?
I believe you're exactly correct. Experience is really important.
And from the Cliffside Malibu website, where your picture is posted, it states, as is true of any disease, addiction can only be overcome with intensive medical specialized care.
Which is provided at Cliffside Malibu, not by Dr. Waldman all the time.
But you agree with that assessment?
I think it's a great assessment.
And you, of course, in your experience, have had patients come to you that had previously received subpar or incompetent addiction care, and then came to you and you were able to help them, correct?
Your words, sir, not mine.
I'm sorry, are you going to?
I have no answer. I think I never made such statement.
I didn't ask you if you made that statement. I'm asking you a question.
No, you're actually putting the words in my mouth. Would you
Your Honor, would the court instruct the witness to answer the question?
Thank you. Cross-examination is, in essence, putting words in your mouth which you can either accept or reject.
I reject.
Okay.
So you have never had a patient come to you that you determined had received incompetent care and you were subsequently able to help them. You've never had that happen?
Sir, I never embellish what I do by denigrating what one of my colleagues does. Addiction treatment, casting dispersion at prior treatment, it's not necessary. When somebody comes to me for treatment, many times they've had prior treatment. Their success or failure of treatment is not a function of who treated them. It's a serious illness. Failure rate is twice the success rate everywhere.
So now, It's not a function of who treated them. That plays no role?
What I said to you in answer to your question again, sir, is that when I accept somebody in treatment, I don't speak negatively about their prior treatment.
I didn't ask you to.
Yes, you did, or the treatment providers.
Okay. Mr. Waldman, have you ever had
Dr.
someone,
Waldman.
Dr. Waldman, have you ever had someone come to you and you've had an opportunity to review their prior care? Have you ever had that happen?
What do you mean by review their prior care?
However you want to interpret it.
You're asking the question, sir. If you ask me a
Your Honor, will
specific
the
question.
court instruct the witness to answer the very simple question?
Are you able to, or do you want it re-asked?
I would like it re-asked, please.
Mr. Walgren?
Have you ever, by any means, whatever you want to put into your answer, have you ever had a patient come to you where you evaluated, by whatever means you want to say, Dr. Waldman, where you've evaluated their prior care as it relates to addiction medicine?
Yes.
Okay. And have you ever had a situation where you did such an evaluation and determined that they did not receive proper care as it relates to addiction medicine?
Yes.
There. Thank you. And when you've had those situations where you determined they had not received proper care as it relates to addiction medicine, have you, as a specialist, been able to help them?
Sometimes, I'm sure I have.
Thank you. And one of the reasons for that is because you have decades of experience in this field, correct?
23 years and more than 25,000 hours.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, you've described, or at least on the website at Cliffside, it describes the care involving two stages, both physical and psychological. Would you agree with that?
I have not looked at what Cliffside Malibu represents on their website. That's their website, not my website.
Could I have the question read back to the witness, Your Honor?
Mrs. Theodoro, please.
Now you have described, or at least on the website at Cliffside, it describes the care involving two stages, both physical and psychological. Would you agree with that?
Repeat that again, please.
Do you agree there's two stages of proper addictions medicine care involving both physical and psychological?
Sir, I don't look at it that way, no. I think
How do you look at it?
It's care of someone with addictive disease requires a team approach. It's multifactorial. It requires a good doctor, a good medical doctor. It requires a good psychiatrist. It requires a good therapist. It requires family support. It requires education to the patient and the family. It involves, as I said at the beginning of my testimony, it involves AA and 12-step meetings. It involves group and single therapy, one-on-one sessions, and so I don't look at it as two stages. If you would like to look at detox as stage one, I mean, someone might portray it thusly, but that's not my approach.
Okay, and so it's actually, there's far more than two stages. Let me be clear if I got everything. So proper addiction medicine care involves a team approach with multifactorial, was that what you said?
Factorial.
Team approach, multifactorial, a good doctor, a good psychologist,
a good psychiatrist,
a good therapist, education, AA meetings, 12-step program, group and individual therapy. Did I miss anything?
I think that was a good summary, sir.
And what does multifactorial mean in that context?
A vague way of saying all the things I was specific about.
Okay. That there are a lot of different factors in the care.
Absolutely. Again, implied by team approach.
Team approach. And the goal, obviously, is to get the person off whatever drug it may be and get them leading a healthy, productive life, correct?
Correct. In my experience, sir, getting them off the drug, which is really my specialty, and comfortably withdrawing them from their substance of abuse is the easy part. Keeping them sober is the hard part.
Now, I wasn't clear. Do you know what Restylane is?
Personally, I have no experience with Restylane. I asked the plastic surgeon what it was, so I would know.
Okay, and it's a skin filler, right?
I think so.
For acne scarring or any type of dermatological scarring, things of that nature?
I honestly don't know its precise use. I have no expertise in dermatology, cosmetics, plastic surgery, etc. But I did, sort of curb consult a friend and say, "What is this stuff?" And that's my understanding of what it is.
And you noted in the medical records, the dermatology medical records, there were Restylane treatments, there were Botox treatments for different parts of the body, correct?
Yes, sir.
And some of these injections were into, for example, below the right orbital, in the right cheekbone, in the chin, in the nose, various locations, correct?
Correct.
And these are documented in the medical records, correct?
Yes.
Frequently with diagrams, for example, of the eyes or the face where the injections were given.
I would say actually infrequently.
There are diagrams showing where the injections were given.
There are occasional diagrams.
And certainly not every page has a diagram. Would you agree with that?
I believe so.
When do you use Demerol in your practice?
I haven't used Demerol probably for 2 decades. There are much better medications and safer medications.
Now, if someone was addicted, let me just ask you, and let me know if you can answer it, is if someone's addicted to a drug, and they stop using the drug, is the point at which you expect to see withdrawal symptoms, does that vary based on the type of drug?
Based on the length of use, the quantity of use, the type of drug, and even then, what makes this so interesting is that there's individual variation. It's difficult to predict.
Okay. But does it, if you said everything else is equal, I'm just curious, does it vary based on the drug alone?
You're asking me, does the onset of withdrawal vary based upon the drug? Again, it depends upon the amount of the drug. It depends on the specific drug, yes, et cetera.
Okay. So giving a window of time then, if someone, for example, Mr. Chernoff asked you about the last Demerol injection being June 22nd, at what period of time from that last injection, if Michael Jackson was addicted, would you expect to see the withdrawal symptoms?
Let me correct your statement, if I may. You mean
it's not a statement; it's a question.
Thank you. Dependent. So, if Michael Jackson got Demerol, did you say on the June 22nd?
That's what Mr. Chernoff asked you, and you were able to answer it.
Okay. Well, he showed me the record. That's how it. So I'm just asking you to refresh my memory, please.
June 22nd.
Okay. Thank you. Demerol has a short half-life. 3, 4, 6, maybe 8 hours. The metabolite accumulates, so that might have some effect as well. So I would expect that 8 to 10 hours after a Demerol dose, he probably would not feel well.
So you would expect to see withdrawal symptoms of some sort between 8 to 10 hours?
Possibly. And you're asking specifically about that date. And
well, disregard the date. I'm just asking because that was the last date reflected in the records. But we'll pick whatever date you want, whatever month you want. I'm asking you when the Demerol injections stop, whatever date, when would you expect to see withdrawal symptoms?
Within a day.
Now, you prepared a chart documenting the injections in June of 2009, correct?
Can you show me that, please?
Well, I just asked you a question. Did you prepare a chart documenting the injections of June 2009?
I did.
Okay. You're going to have a chart here. I'd ask that be marked People's Next in order. I believe 226.
226.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Let me show you this, Dr. Waldman. You can tell me if it's a chart you prepared for defense counsel. Looking at People's 226, do you recognize that?
No.
You did not prepare this?
Can you hand me that chart?
Sure, sure.
Thank you, sir.
Showing it to the witness, Your Honor.
Thank you.
This is not my chart.
What chart did you prepare?
I had the secretary in my office chart for my review the Demerol and Midazolam doses that were discussed during prior testimony.
So if this was given to me represented as a chart from you, this was...
Just a moment, please. I'll sustain the objection. You can refine a question.
Have you ever seen this chart before?
No, sir.
All right. Let me ask you, let me put it on the screen.
Objection to relevance.
I'll overrule the objection. Counsel can inquire.
Well,
Now, I want to reference this as we go through the records that was
Your
referred
Honor,
to.
this chart hasn't been identified as anything yet.
May I see counsel, please? Please continue.
Thank you. Dr. Waldman, you testified regarding the Demerol injections in June 2009 when Mr. Chernoff was going through that with you. Do you remember that?
I do.
And we've already heard it, but let's see if we can hear it again. And that is, did you or did you not create this chart?
I did not.
All right, thank you.
And may I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Dr. Waldman, can you just take a moment looking at People's 226, and I have the records here with me so you can confirm whether it's accurate or not.
Thank you.
What is you see the first date entry there of June 1st, 2009?
I do.
And you see, I'm holding, you see June 1st, 2009, the records you've already testified to?
I do, thank you.
And you see a Demerol injection of 200 milligrams?
I do.
Okay, is that accurately reflected on People's 226?
It is.
Going to the next date of June 3rd, 2009. And again, do you see the date of the records, June 3rd, 2009?
I do.
And two separate dosages of Demerol for a total of 200 milligrams. Is that accurately reflected on People's 226?
It is.
Then going to the next date of June 9th, 2009. Do you see, and again, you've already testified to this, the two separate doses of for a total of 200 milligrams. Is that accurately reflected on People's 226?
Yes, sir.
Going forward to the next date, showing you the records, June 16th, 2009. Do you see a dose of 100 milligrams of Demerol?
I do.
And is that accurately reflected on People's 226?
Yes, sir.
And then going to the last date of June 22nd, 2009, do you see another dose of 100 milligrams of Demerol?
I do.
Okay, and is that accurately reflected on People's 226?
Yes, sir.
So that People's 226 is an accurate representation of what is reflected in the medical records that you've already testified to, correct, for the month of June?
Yes, sir.
Now, if you would expect to see, well, let me just ask you, this is inconsistent, is it not, with expecting to see withdrawals within 8 to 10 hours, that we have this kind of time frame between injections?
What, on what day?
Well, looking at People's 226, so from June 1st to June 3rd, so from June 1st, according to the records, Michael Jackson went 3 days before he received another injection of 200 milligrams, correct?
I'd like to refer you, sir, to the fact that he used extensive, large doses of Demerol all through April, all through early May, and again at the end of May.
Did you understand my question?
I do, but we have to consider the prior use as well, sir.
You did understand my question?
Rephrase it.
I'm sorry?
Please re-ask it.
Can I have the court reporter read it back, Your Honor?
Yes, before she does that, do you want some more water?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Theodora?
Looking at People's 226, so from June 1st to June 3rd, according to the records, Michael Jackson went 3 days before he received another injection of 200 milligrams, correct?
Just to read the chart into testimony again, I see on the 1st and the 3rd a total of 400 milligrams of Demerol. We have no record to review between the 3rd and the 9th, and then on the 9th he received 200 milligrams. So we have no data for the dates in between.
Interesting. Can I have the court reporter read back the question again, Your Honor?
You may re-ask the question. Is there an objection?
Yes. It's been asked and answered.
It has not been answered.
Just a moment, please. The objection is overruled. I was asking the people if you had an objection.
Yes, non-responsive.
Sustained.
Motion to strike.
The answer is stricken. Disregard the last answer. We'll have the question re-asked.
Thank you.
Mr. Waldman.
Dr. Waldman, from June 1st, there was 200 milligram injection of Demerol, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then, according to the records, there were 3 days elapsed going to June 3rd when Michael Jackson was given another injection of 200 milligrams, correct?
Sir, that would be 48 hours, 2 days. The 1st to the 3rd, please.
And so from June 1st, he didn't get any on the 2nd, and then on the 3rd, he received 200 milligrams, correct?
According to only the records of Dr. Klein's chart.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, repeatedly you've indicated that Dr. Klein gave too much Demerol when there were sequential days of 3, and you trust the records then, right?
Sir, I've never said I trust the records. The records are inadequate, but I can look at the records and interpret them.
Did you look at the records that Dr. Murray provided for his treatment of Michael Jackson?
Objection to relevance. And asked and answered. He
The
was.
objection is sustained. It assumes facts not in evidence. You may re-ask the question.
So then from June 3rd to June 10th, how many days elapsed before the next injection?
Sir, let me redirect you a tad. It's June 3rd to June 9th, so that was 6 days.
6 days, okay.
Yes.
And then from June 9th to June 16th, how many days elapsed?
1 week.
And then from June 16th to June 22nd, how many days elapsed?
6.
And as an addiction specialist, then, would you characterize, is this unusual that if Michael Jackson would be experiencing withdrawals within 8 to 10 hours, that there would be this much period of time between injections? Is that unusual?
Sir, persons with opioid dependence and addiction, as we discussed, often have multiple sources. If they can't get their main med, they will look elsewhere to get it, and I have no data. So the answer is I really don't know what was happening in those days.
Let's talk about other sources. What would you say would be the most common withdrawal symptoms for a benzodiazepine or lorazepam addiction? What would be the 4 or 5 most common symptoms you'd expect to see?
The most common and the most prominent is absolutely anxiety.
And one of them also is insomnia, correct?
Correct.
What else, as far as the most common?
Restlessness. For benzodiazepine?
Yes.
Okay. Restlessness, agitation, inability to sleep, crawly skin, just inability to really get any form of comfort. Overwhelming anxiety.
Fear? Is that kind of included in anxiety?
Fear even comes before that because they're fearful they're not going to get medicated.
Now, as a controlled substance and regulated by the Drug Enforcement Agency, there are specific state and federal rules that apply to lorazepam, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. One of those rules involves the proper storage of lorazepam to keep it out of hands of individuals that shouldn't have it or are not being monitored, correct?
I have no experience and no expertise whatsoever with storing any form of lorazepam, sir.
Well, I have an exhibit here. It's from the Laws Governing the Practice of Medicine, published by the Medical Board of California, including a section on 5.7 on medical records and 5...
Just a moment. You can just identify this, how many page document?
3-page document, Your Honor.
3-page document, 227?
Please, Your Honor.
227. Mr. Chernoff, have you seen it?
Nope.
You may. It's being shown to Mr. Chernoff. Thank you, Mr. Chernoff.
Dr. Waldman, would you agree with the statement as it relates to controlled substances, that state and federal laws require physicians to maintain adequate and accurate medical records? Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
And would you agree with the statement that pursuant to state and federal laws, these records must be kept for a minimum of 3 years?
Yes, sir. I actually thought it was 7, but I accept 3 if that's what you're reading.
And also, as put out by the Medical Board of California, would you agree with this statement as it relates to controlled substances, that a physician is required to keep drugs in a securely locked and substantially constructed cabinet or safe?
Yes, sir.
And why is that requirement in place?
To prevent theft and diversion.
That's it?
I believe so.
You don't think it relates to preventing unsafe use of the drugs?
That would require theft and diversion.
Okay. So it's theft, meaning someone getting access to the drugs.
Even an employee, of course.
Anybody.
Anybody.
And that's why it should be in a locked, secured cabinet.
If
Correct?
I agree with all the aspects of the law, sir.
So keeping the records, for example, that we just referenced for, I said 3 years, you thought it was 7, that would be the acceptable standard of care as to medical records, right? Pursuant to state and federal law.
Yes, keeping records, accurate records, that would be the accepted standard.
And as it relates to securing controlled substances, the acceptable standard of care would be, as I indicated, to have it in a locked, secured cabinet or safe, correct?
I have to back up one second.
Well, we can clarify. I'm asking a question about the storage of controlled substances. The acceptable standard of care would involve keeping them secured in a locked cabinet or safe or equivalent structure, correct?
And you document what's there and when it leaves, and there's signatures going in, going out, etc.
So
that would be the standard of care.
So that it be
In fact, that's the law.
that it be in a locked, secured cabinet or safe,
Yes, sir.
that it be an inventory be maintained,
Yes, sir.
Can you describe to me, as an addiction medicine specialist, characterize for us the doctor-patient relationship?
Just in general?
Who makes the decisions as to proper medical care in the doctor-patient relationship as it relates to addiction medicine?
Okay. Well, let me give my overview of that. I think
No, I asked you a question.
it's not a yes/no question.
If you can't answer this, then you can answer. You can answer. I'm going to be very
Okay.
specific. Who makes the decision as to the proper medical care to be given as it relates to addiction medicine? The patient or the doctor?
Both.
So the patient decides what type of medical care is appropriate.
Again, what's involved is the development of a good therapeutic relationship, a therapeutic bond, and then the doctor and patient move forward as part of the team. So very often there are more than one way to treat a problem. So yes, you have to present your patient all of the available treatment options, and then you recommend, or in the appropriate circumstance, strongly recommend what you would like them to do. If they choose not to follow your recommendation, you move forward from there and work that out.
You said you explained to them all the available treatment options. That's called informed consent, correct?
I don't know if that's exactly informed consent, but again, I think education is part of our job as physicians, so I do my best to educate my patients as to what the possibilities are, and then I make my strong recommendation about what I'd like them to pursue with respect to course of treatment. Yes.
And you said if you make a strong recommendation and they refuse, you said you move forward. What does that mean?
Well, I've had patients tell me that they would like to detox from opiates with other opiates, and I tell them that's a non-starter. That's not going to happen. In my experience, if you're persuasive and sincere and you strongly believe in what you're presenting to your patient in any aspect of medical care, the patient generally will do what you suggest, but you have to present them the options.
An example you gave is if a patient wanted to go through detox with the very drug they were dependent on, you would not do that.
For opiates.
What about other drugs?
Well, for instance, you've asked a number of questions about benzodiazepines. I often offer people the opportunity to taper their benzodiazepine, which is quite safe, or do another form of medication substitution therapy. In my practice, I prefer to substitute phenobarb for benzodiazepine and then taper that. That's safe.
Why do you prefer, and you gave the example lorazepam, you said you prefer to use another drug. Why do you prefer doing that rather than tapering off the use of lorazepam?
I like to stop the drug of addiction immediately.
Because that's the goal.
Because that's the goal. But some people would prefer not to do it that way. So again, you have to, as in many other aspects of medicine, you really have to individualize treatment.
So again, going back to you strongly recommend a course of treatment based on your medical judgment, and the patient refuses, and there's no other alternative. What do you do?
I don't treat them.
And if a patient asked you for you to administer a dangerous drug, a drug you thought could be harmful, and it was not medically indicated, would you refuse to give that drug to the patient?
Absolutely.
Thank you, doctor.
Waldman, thank you. Mr. Chernoff, this would be redirect examination.
Okay, Doctor, let me see People's exhibit. They're demonstrative A. People's number, is it number 226?
227, I believe.
Okay, is it 227? Because it says 226 on here.
I may be wrong.
I believe it's 226, Your Honor, the chart.
Oh, the chart, yes, 226. Thank you. I'm sorry.
You did not make this, right? Like they said, right?
I did not make that chart.
You actually did put together some charts. We were trying to determine the cycle of use. Is that right?
Yes.
And let me show you an example of that. This is VVV, Defense VVV, Judge.
It's triple Victor.
Okay. And we in our discussions we were looking at the medical records, and we were trying to determine the cycle. Do you recall our discussions on that?
I do.
And you put this together with was it Excel? Was it an Excel? Oh, your secretary did.
You know, I have a wonderful secretary in my
Okay.
office, and she's much more chart literate than I, so she created that.
And then you did it for May as well. And I'm gonna mark this as WWW.
Triple whiskey.
Okay. And we were somewhat confused by the change in the process, in the amount, in the drugs and the amounts and everything else. Do you recall the conversation we had?
Yes.
And then, and this was all based only on Arnold Klein's medical records, right?
Correct.
Now, during our conversation, during your review of this analysis, I also provided you the testimony of various individuals that testified in this case. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, prior to providing you that testimony, hearing that testimony in the trial, we had conversations about whether or not these records were complete. You remember those conversations?
I do.
Were you concerned?
All right. At this point in time, the objection's over. The answer will remain.
Were you concerned about whether these records were complete at that time?
No. When I first looked at the records, I had no reason to be concerned that they were incomplete.
You just made the assumption that they were right.
I just assumed that the records were the records. They had been submitted, and I accepted them as submitted.
Because we received them through subpoena, right? By court
Yes.
order. All right.
The court received them
The
through
objection
subpoena.
is sustained. The answer will be stricken. Disregard the last answer. You can re-ask it, please.
Thanks. And subsequent to that time, then we had the ability to obtain the testimony of of Fahim Muhammad, right?
Yes.
And Michael Amir Williams.
Yes.
And you reviewed the testimony of those individuals.
Very briefly.
And you know what they had to say, or you learned what they had to say about the frequency of Michael Jackson's visits to Arnold Klein's office.
Yes.
And Fahim Muhammad said essentially every day.
That's my understanding.
Objection misstates the testimony.
Now,
Just a moment, please. The objection is sustained. The partial answer is stricken. Absent further foundation is to a time frame.
you then reviewed the medical records together. Actually, we reviewed the medical records and after that time. Did you, subsequent to that time, have a difference of opinion about Arnold Klein's medical records?
I'm sorry.
Did you after reviewing the testimony of these security staff, did that have any influence on your your opinion of the completeness of Arnold Klein's medical records.
Certainly, if there's testimony indicating daily visits, there are large periods of time in which there were not daily visits.
When you see periods of time in June or May, I'm going to show www again, where 3-day periods of time Michael Jackson's receiving 900 milligrams of Demerol or 500 milligrams of Demerol, and then you see, and there are blocks of time where there's no medical records, there's no dates on Klein's medical records. Does that seem consistent with your analysis that Michael Jackson was addicted to Demerol?
Well, those gaps of time are concerning. There's no record that he saw Dr. Klein that we have. And so what took place in those gaps of time is curious and cause for concern with respect to his well-being, for sure, with respect to the amount of Demerol he used, particularly in April prior to that 10-day period of time.
Would it be helpful in making that determination if Dr. Arnold Klein was consulted?
He may have a recollection of a visit that he didn't document. I think that's possible.
Would it be helpful to making that determination if we were to have the testimony of the nurses and the office staff at Arnold Klein's office?
Objection based on the court's prior ruling.
Sustained.
Essentially, you have to make your determination based only on Arnold Klein's medical records, though. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Now, one of the things we talked about was detox, and then after detox, rehab. Is that right? What would be an appropriate period of rehab for an individual who is suffering from opioid addiction?
Again, a lot of individual variability. It really depends upon how long-term the use has been and what kind of commitment they're willing to make to get well.
Well,
and I might add also how sick they are in other respects.
Is rehab really necessary, though, doctor?
I believe so.
Why?
If all that one does is provide opioid cessation treatment or so-called detox from opiates or alcohol or benzodiazepines, then what we have is an untreated addict who's sober, but they're not well.
Well, what if the individual won't go to rehab?
It's most of the time, not all of the time. Sometimes it's court mandated, but if it's voluntary, we don't really have much choice. Hands are tied.
All right. One of the things that Mr. Waldman was talking about was the locked up, was the requirement that controlled substances be locked up.
Yes.
Remember that conversation?
Yes.
Do you know that controlled substances have a high potential for addiction and abuse? Is that right?
Yes.
And that's exactly why they are classified as controlled substances by the DEA. Right?
Yes.
And they need to be locked up. Is that right?
That's the law.
And that law is limited to controlled substances.
As far as I know.
All right. And you mentioned that the reason for that is as a result of the high potential for addiction and abuse.
And theft and diversion.
Because that's
to addiction and abuse.
That's what addicts do. They steal.
Yes.
All right.
Or other persons do to make money.
All right. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chernoff, thank you. This will be recrossed by the people.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
I see that chart. Let me show you, Dr. Waldman, VVV, because I was confused by these charts, and I understand. I believe you said your secretary made them.
I provided her all the data. She simply utilized the computer.
Okay, so you provided the data that's reflected there.
Based upon my chart review and my notes on the chart, sir.
Okay. So I want to go through this, and let me, I'll give you a copy. Oh, may I have the defense exhibit, actually, medical records.
This is triple Victor.
Thank you. I think the medical records are triple U.
Well, it depends what. You're talking about the chart?
The chart's triple Victor on the screen, Your Honor.
The medical rec, okay.
Yes.
Triple uniform.
And let me bring these to you, Dr. Waldman. And so you provided the data. Let's look at April 2nd of this chart. If you could, just take a moment to yourself and go through those records. Again, specifically for April 2nd, please. And you reflected on there a dose of 200 milligrams of Demerol for April 2nd. Could you point where that is?
I think Dr. Waldman is still
I'm good.
locating the
I'm
page.
good.
All right.
Dr. Waldman, isn't it true that there was no dose whatsoever of Demerol on April 2nd, correct?
You know, you are correct.
Okay. So I'm going to...
But I need to intercede one point. What my statement was that I was provided a written review by defense of the charts, and I utilized that plus my notes. So, but from
Actually, what you said was you provided the data
to my
secretary.
Yeah, I culled the data from all of the above and provided it to my secretary. So this is probably my error.
Okay. I don't want to write on the defense copy. I have the same chart for April, Your Honor. May this be marked Peoples 228?
Yes.
So April 2nd, there was no Demerol and no midazolam, correct?
That's according to this chart. That is correct, sir.
So I'm crossing that off of the chart you provided. I want to go now to April 6th of 2009, again showing data that you provided, or culled, I think your word was. Explain this chart to me, because...
Can you bring me a copy, please?
Yes, I'll give you the defense.
Thank you.
Triple E.
Thank you.
So looking at the axis here to the left, this line for April 6th represents 200 milligrams of Demerol, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then so if this chart would then represent 100 milligrams of midazolam on April 6th?
No, sir. No, sir. That's 1 milligram. That's the Demerol, add 2 zeros. The midazolam in the brown is exact. This is my own personal chart that I was using.
Do you see the axis here where it goes 0, 1?
Yes.
2? These are in hundreds, right? I mean, the 2 represents...
It depends on which drug you're talking about, sir.
How does that...
Those are hundreds for the Demerol, milligrams for the midazolam. If you look at the bottom, it says midazolam dose, Demerol dose.
Right.
I created this
right.
just for ease of fast review.
Right. So reading this chart, this chart, if you read this chart...
So for April 6th...
I'm asking you a question.
Sure.
Not all question.
Reading
now we will hear.
Reading this chart, it would reflect 100 milligrams of midazolam, correct?
No.
So where on the chart does it explain that this is a 1, but this is a 200? Where is that explained on your chart?
Again, this is for my own personal use, and that's how I chose to create it, and I understand exactly what it says.
I'm sure you do. My question was where on the chart?
There is no key because I was the only intended reader. There is no key that says,
So what does this 0.5 mean? Does that mean?
You can allow Dr. Waldman to finish his answer. There is no key
I'm
that says...
done, sir. I'm done, sir.
All right, thank you.
What does the 0.5 represent? Or let me just ask, what does this 1 represent?
1 would represent either 100 milligrams of Demerol or 1 milligram of midazolam. If you look, may I explain? Sir, may I?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. If you look at the record,
No, I'm talking about your chart.
where did the chart come from?
You.
Thank you. And where did I get it?
I have no idea.
I told you before.
Okay, excuse me. This is a fascinating colloquy, but we do have questions and answers, so let's have them, please. Thank you.
So each of these midazolam doses should actually be, the bars should be consistent with this axis here. Each of the midazolam doses should actually be way down here at the bottom, correct?
Sir, I'm not going to answer that. Now you're making a chart. The chart I made is just right there. I'm not changing it.
What does this,
I agree
what
with
does
you.
this 2 represent? What does
That
this 2?
represents 2 milligrams of midazolam.
This
Or 200 milligrams of Demerol.
Okay, so the 2
I think
is,
it's a very clear chart.
the 2 is 200 milligram Demerol or 2 milligram midazolam.
Depends
Okay,
on which.
first
Is that
objection
correct?
is now he's written on what is a demonstrative aid. Second objection is the witness already testified. This
Just a
wasn't.
moment. We
this-
don't have to hear argument, as we've indicated. The objection is sustained. Continue, Mr. Waldman.
So the 2 represents 200 milligram of Demerol or 2 milligrams midazolam, depending on which drug.
What I'm going to tell you is that if you look at the records provided from Dr. Klein's office, it's interesting. It's always in round numbers. 100 of Demerol, a milligram of midazolam. 200 of Demerol, a milligram of midazolam. 200 or 300 of Demerol, 2 milligrams of midazolam. It lent itself to very easy representation in the most simple way. I am not a mathematician. I am not a statistician. I have no expertise. I created a bar chart because I thought it was helpful to spread it out and look at the spectrum of dosing. Period.
So if you just answer the question, so the 2 represents 200 milligrams of Demerol
Objection,
or
counsel's
2
being
milligrams of
argumentative.
midazolam. Is that accurate?
The objection is sustained to the form of the question, and it's been asked and answered.
And this would apply across the chart. The way you've used the chart applies across the chart for the month of April, correct?
Yes, sir.
Could you flip to April 20th in the medical records, please?
There is no April 20th.
Okay, so on People's 228, this is incorrect where you have you have a 300 milligram dose of Demerol. That's not reflected in the medical records, correct?
That is, again, incorrect. But again, this is not all the information.
I'm sorry?
This is not all the information that I used to create this chart.
Okay, where did you get this for April 20th?
Again, I told you before, there's information that was provided to me by defense.
What was that?
It was a written summary of the chart. I don't have it with me.
So you never reviewed the medical records?
I stated previously, I reviewed all of the medical records.
Okay, so let me ask you about the medical records. Is there a 300 milligram dose of Demerol on April 20th?
There is not.
Okay. Is there a 2 or 200 milligram dose of midazolam for April 20th?
There is not.
Okay. looking at defense WWW, again for May, just to be clear then, these dosages of midazolam are 2 milligram doses, correct?
I don't have that information in front of me. You want to share? Or should I look here?
Aren't you holding the medical records?
Yeah. Oh, you want me to look in the medical records? I'm
Yeah,
just asking.
For the month of May, I'm just asking about the way you built your chart. The
Same technique.
Okay, so the reflections on the chart for midazolam are 2 milligram doses for May.
Correct. What it is, again, is summary of doses on a given day. There were multiple doses on given days, but you won't see multiple doses on the chart. You just see the total daily dose as I reviewed it from the written statements that were given to me and the chart.
June 2009, may this be marked People's 229 for identification?
Yes.
Looking at going forward to June, Doctor, can you tell me what dose was received on June 2nd as reflected in your chart?
I don't think there was a visit on June 2nd.
Okay, so on People's 229.
According to the office chart.
On People's 229, I'm going to cross out this entry. And then there was one, however, on June 3rd, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And how about...
May I interrupt for a moment?
No, Mr. Chernoff will have a chance to
Okay.
ask you questions.
Okay.
Going to June 4th, could you tell me what the medical records show on June 4th?
This office chart does not have a visit on June 4th.
So this entry is incorrect, correct?
Yes.
And again, as with the other months, the midazolam dosages are 2 milligram, correct?
The total dose on June 3rd was 2 milligrams.
Across the whole chart, I'm just asking, it's the same as the other months. The 2 represents 2 for midazolam. It represents in the hundreds.
Yes. No, there's no change in the units.
Now, you were aware that during these months, and let's just stick primarily with May and June 2009, you were aware that Conrad Murray was Michael Jackson's personal physician?
I don't have any personal knowledge of that, no.
Mike, were you aware that from the evidence in this case that Conrad Murray was Michael Jackson's personal physician for the months possibly April, May, and June 2009?
I don't know when he started, so I'm not party to that information.
Wouldn't you want to know that information, who his personal doctor was?
My focus was very specific, and I did not want to know who his personal doctor was or where he got his care. My focus was specific with respect to his opioid use.
You didn't want to know who his personal doctor was?
I mean, I was under the impression, again, as I said, I know that he had a relationship with Dr. Murray. I don't know when it started. So the reason I said I don't know to your question is you gave me a time frame. I don't know when the time frame began.
You actually said you didn't want to know.
It wasn't pertinent to me at that time, no.
So you're evaluating whether someone's addicted, whether they're receiving proper care, and you don't want to know who their personal physician is, who is seeing them nearly every single day.
Michael Jackson was not my patient. I didn't examine, interview, or interact
I didn't
with him.
ask you that, Dr. Waldman.
Why?
I didn't ask you that.
Again.
No question pending. Thank you. You didn't want to know who Michael Jackson's personal physician was?
Michael Jackson wasn't my patient.
Okay. Non-responsive. Motion to strike.
Sustained. The answer is stricken.
You didn't want to know, in your evaluation of this case, you didn't want to know who Michael Jackson's personal physician was during the months that you've been testifying about?
I think from the look, Michael Jackson had multiple personal physicians.
Motion to strike. Non-responsive.
Sustained.
Your Honor, this is outside the scope of direct. It's already been established what he
Just a moment, please. We're not going to have argument. The objection is sustained. The answer is stricken.
Dr. Waldman, in your evaluation of this case and the evidence in this case, did you?
My objection, though, is it's outside the scope of direct and the scope of what he
All
was.
right, the objection is sustained, beyond the scope.
Dr. Waldman, in your evaluation of this evidence, wasn't it important for you to know who Michael Jackson's personal physician was at the time?
It's the same objection, and it's asked and answered.
The objection is sustained.
It has not been answered, Your Honor.
Thank you. The objection is sustained. Your next subject area.
You indicated that you had considered what was out in the public arena. Weren't you aware that Conrad Murray, from news reports, was Michael Jackson's personal doctor?
When I was in the dialysis unit when Michael Jackson was pronounced and I heard the news.
Motion to strike, non-responsive.
Sustained. The answer is stricken.
Weren't you aware from public reports that Conrad Murray was Michael Jackson's personal doctor during this time you've testified about?
Again, if you would give me a time frame, I'll give you my best answer.
Did you hear my question during this time you've
During
testified about?
what time? Give me dates.
You've testified about April, May. Actually, you testified about March, April, May, and June, correct?
I only testified about Dr. Arnold Klein's office dermatology records, sir.
Weren't you aware from what was out in the public arena that during the months preceding Michael Jackson's death, Conrad Murray was in fact his personal physician?
I'm going to tell you again, I really don't pay much attention to the public arena with respect to this specific event or trial. I didn't pay attention.
But you
I think it
previously
maintains my objectivity.
But you previously said that you did consider what was out in the public arena in making a determination as to whether Michael Jackson was an opioid addict, correct?
I'm referring to past history and behaviors from the 1980s, from the 1990s.
Okay, so
that's really what I'm referring to.
When it
not
supported
not
your
April of 2008, sir.
Okay. When it supported your opinion, you brought in outside sources, and when it did not support your opinion, you did not.
Gross misstatement.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor.
Mr. Waldman, anything further? On recross?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
We redirect. Mr. Chernoff.
5 minutes, Judge.
Thank you.
When I first talked to you, I sent you out basically a series of a summary of Arnold Klein's medical records, right?
A written summary, correct.
And you, in trying to understand the medical records, asked your secretary to put together some diagrams or charts, right?
The diagrams or charts were created by the documentation that you sent me plus the chart. That's correct.
Right. And then
in addition,
yes.
I also want to tell you, the copy that I received, the dates were very, very difficult to read. It wasn't anywhere even remotely as clear as this document here. I think it had been copied probably 4 or 5 times.
Right.
And emailed.
Yeah, right. Well, it had watermark on it and everything else, right?
Correct.
Okay. But then we went over these charts and we talked about the mistakes, the problems with them, right?
Yes.
And then we didn't use them as a result.
Correct.
These were introduced by Mr. Chernoff.
They were introduced to show the
Just a moment,
process,
please.
not.
Just remember.
Well, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation. Sustain. Just follow through. Mr. Chernoff, thank you.
These charts were never designed to be introduced to anybody. Isn't that right?
Relevant.
The objection is sustained.
Okay. Did I ask you to prepare these charts?
No.
Okay. You prepared them for your own notes, right?
I did because I thought it would be valuable to just look at it in a large scope
Then later,
over a period of time.
okay. Then later we went over the medical records. Is that right?
Correct.
And we made those corrections.
Correct.
Okay. When I spoke to you and hired you on this case, what was the scope of the employment? What is it that you were supposed to address and look at in this case?
Opioid abuse, addiction, dependence, opioid withdrawal, treatment for opioid dependence, period.
Did you do anything with regard to any other issue in this case?
I did not.
You just addressed that particular issue. Is that right?
Very specifically, period.
All right. Now, one of we talked about some of the mistakes in the records. For instance, we see that in April 20, your personal chart, we see that on April 20th there was no use of Demerol, but it turns out there was the 21st there was use of Demerol, right?
Correct.
And then we had differing days and the like on your personal charts. Is that right? Is that
I'm
right?
sorry, it's
Characterization. Counsel introduced these into evidence.
Just a moment. Let's not have argument. Remember, the objection's overruled. You can finish your question, please.
Please rephrase.
The days that you had on your personal chart that was offered, all right, by the people. That
mistakes that what occurred. Defense counsel introduced these charts.
The
people
objection is
229.
the objection is sustained. You're going to have to refer to a particular exhibit, please.
People's 229, People's 228 that they were talking about, your personal charts, right?
Yes.
There were other days that were missing from those charts, and there were some days that were added from those charts, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And later we addressed all that, you and I, and we made those corrections. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, the medical records that have been introduced in this case, they are clear about the dates. These are clear medical records. They have the dates and the amounts. Is that right?
They have the dates, but I'm going to tell you the copy I got was relatively illegible with respect to dates.
Well, my question, though, is that
They are all dated.
Yes, they're all dated. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. We recross?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. May Dr. Waldman step down and leave subject to recall, Mr. Chernoff?
Yes, Judge. Thank you.
Mr. Waldman?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Dr. Waldman, I want to thank you for your testimony. Sir, please don't discuss your testimony or the facts of the case with any other witness until we finish the trial. You may step down and leave. However, you are to remain on call throughout the rest of the case, which means you're subject to being recalled if necessary. Thank you, sir. You may step
Thank
down.
you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take the noon recess at this time. Of course, please remember all the written and verbal admonitions, and we'll see you back at 2 o'clock. We have some other matters to discuss, so we'll be in recess from your standpoint until 2 p.m. Thank you.